The resolute Dawn drifted through the vast emptiness of deep space, her engines humming softly as she patrolled the uncharted frontier, far from the reach of Earth's influence. The ship was a relic of humanity's early spacefaring days, a model now deemed obsolete by most. But to Captain Adrian Voss, it was a symbol of defiance, a vessel built from human ingenuity, still capable of standing tall against the unknown. Voss sat in her command chair, eyes fixed on the star charts displayed before her. She wasn't supposed to be out here. The Council had placed strict limits on humanity's expansion, restricting exploration to known territories. But Voss, ever the restless soul, had ignored those constraints. Her fleet, the Shield Armada, was a small but capable force made up of volunteers, misfits, and outcasts. Those who, like her, believed that humanity had a role to play in the larger galactic drama, even if it meant crossing boundaries others feared. It was then that the signal came. The communications console flickered, the usual quiet hum replaced by an eerie static. Lieutenant Harlow, her communications officer, glanced up from his station. "Captain, we're receiving something. Faint, but definitely not from a standard frequency." Voss turned her attention to the console. "Patch it through, Lieutenant." The static cleared, but the voice that emerged was distorted, desperate. A fractured cry for help, barely audible over the interference. "Please, please help us. They're coming. We can't. Not again." Voss's eyes narrowed. The signal was weak, barely a whisper in the void, but the tone of fear was unmistakable. She felt a chill run through her, though she kept her expression steady. "Who was this?" "Location?" Voss asked, her voice calm but commanding. Harlow worked quickly, tracing the signal's source. "Originating from a system in the fringe, well outside our mapped territories, Captain. It's not registered in any of the nearby sectors. If it's a distress call, it's from somewhere far off the grid." Voss stood, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her. She knew this was no ordinary distress signal. Whoever had sent it was in dire straits, perhaps already lost. The hegemony was known to operate in this region, a brutal empire that enslaved worlds with merciless efficiency. Could this be one of their victims? "I want every detail on that signal. Now," Voss ordered. "We're going to check it out." Lieutenant Harlow hesitated, his fingers hovering over the console. "Captain, the Council. They've given orders to avoid the hegemony. If we go into that area—" "I don't care what the Council says," Voss interrupted. "We don't leave people to die. Not on my watch." A silence fell over the bridge. The crew knew better than to challenge her once she'd made up her mind. They were used to her stubbornness, her unyielding belief that humanity could be something more than just a footnote in the galaxy's endless history. Voss's eyes scanned the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, someone was calling for help. And humanity, her crew, her fleet, was going to answer. Arathel was a world that had once been a beacon of life, a lush, verdant planet that pulsed with the rhythms of its native species, the Arathelian people. With their bird-like features and intricate cultural tapestry, they had thrived under the peaceful reign of their leaders. But that was before the hegemony came. Now, the once thriving cities were shattered ruins. The skies above Arathel were choked with smoke, blackened by the constant bombardments from the hegemony's warships hovering in orbit. The oceans, once crystal clear, were now tainted with the runoff of mining operations. Beneath the oppressive shadow of the hegemony's fleets, the Arathelian people were reduced to nothing more than slaves, forced to labor in the endless extraction of rare minerals. Kale watched from the shadows as his sister, Lyra, was dragged away by hegemony guards. Her wings flapped weakly in protest as a pair of armored soldiers, reptilian in appearance, seized her roughly by the arms. The guards laughed as they escorted her to the transport ship waiting to take her to the labor mines. "Please, please don't take her," Kale shouted, his voice hoarse with a mixture of fear and fury. He stepped forward, only to be shoved back into the alley by a few more guards who passed by, rifles raised. The sound of Lyra's cries echoed in his mind, but he knew better than to act on impulse. He had learned that lesson all too well. The hegemony didn't tolerate resistance. As the transport ship lifted off, Kale clenched his fists, his heart pounding in his chest. His people had been broken, their will crushed by the sheer might of the hegemony's war machine. It had been years since anyone had dared to fight back, since any hope of liberation had seemed more than a distant dream. He had been a part of the resistance once, but it had been futile. Their weapons were no match for the overwhelming force of the hegemony, and their ranks had dwindled to nothing. Cal's hands trembled, his thoughts turning bitter. Why should we keep fighting? What good is rebellion when you know you're going to lose? But then, as he walked the crowded streets of the ruined city, something caught his attention. A flicker of light in the sky, distant but unmistakable. Ships. Not the dark, monolithic vessels of the hegemony, but something smaller, sleeker. Faster. His heart skipped a beat. It was a human fleet. The rumors were true. Humans were coming. A wave of disbelief washed over Kale, followed by an overwhelming sense of desperation. Could they really do it? Could humans, who had never known the hegemony's wrath, actually stand against such power? As the faint hum of their engines grew louder, Kale felt a strange surge of hope. It had been so long since he had allowed himself to dream of victory, and now, with the humans arriving, something within him stirred. Maybe this was the moment, the one they had been waiting for. Maybe, just maybe, this time the tide could turn. The Resolute Dawn dropped out of hyperspace, its engines glowing brightly as it entered the fringes of the Arathal system. Captain Voss stood at the command deck, her eyes narrowed as she studied the swirling starfields and the faint outline of Arathal in the distance. It looked like any other peaceful system on the surface, until you knew what lay beneath. "Status report, Lieutenant," Voss asked, her voice calm but sharp. Lieutenant Harlow's fingers flew across the console. "The hegemony presence is as expected, Captain. 3 capital ships in orbit, multiple patrols, nothing unexpected. They don't seem to have noticed our approach yet." Voss nodded, but her expression was tight. The odds were stacked against them. The Shield Armada, all 5 ships, was barely a fraction of the hegemony's power. A single misstep, and it would be over. Her first officer, Commander Ivan Sharp, approached her quietly. "Captain, with all due respect, we're going to be outmatched if they call for reinforcements. Are we really prepared for this?" Voss glanced at Sharp, meeting his gaze. She knew he was right. The fleet was far smaller than any of the hegemony's warbands. Humanity's ships were designed for quick strikes, not prolonged conflict. If they made their move, it would have to be precise, calculated, and fast. "We're not prepared," Voss replied softly, her tone cutting through the air like a blade. "But we have no choice, Ivan. If we leave now, we abandon these people. I will not do that." Sharp looked conflicted. "And if we die out here?" Voss's eyes hardened. "Then we die knowing we did the right thing." There was a pause, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Sharp didn't respond, but his gaze softened, understanding what it meant to her, to them all. This was bigger than just one battle. It was about the future of the galaxy, about humanity's role in it. If they chose to turn away now, they would forever be a footnote in history. They would be no better than the oppressors they sought to fight. Voss turned to the communications officer. "Send a message to the Arathelian resistance. Tell them we're coming to help." No more waiting. Harlow hesitated before nodding and relaying the order. The humans had no alliance with the Arathelian people. Not yet. There would be no formal treaties, no guarantees. This was a gamble, but it was one they had to take. If they didn't, the galaxy would remain silent while the hegemony crushed one more world into submission. The bridge went quiet, save for the hum of the ship's systems and the soft tapping of keyboards. Voss took a deep breath and stood straighter, locking eyes with her crew. "Prepare to engage. We strike fast. We strike hard." It was a risky move, and the consequences could be catastrophic, but as she watched the stars swirl around them, Voss knew that inaction was the greater threat. They would fight. And if they were lucky, they would win. But even if they didn't, humanity would not be remembered as the species that stood idly by. The Resolute Dawn and its ragtag fleet drifted silently toward Erethel, cloaked in the dark of space. The tension in the command room was palpable. Every crew member knew the stakes. Their gamble was about to unfold. Approaching the outer perimeter of hegemony detection range, Lieutenant Harlow reported, his voice low, tense. "We've still got a few minutes before their patrols spot us." Voss's mind raced, calculating their next moves. Every moment that passed brought them closer to the inevitable collision with hegemony forces. She had hoped, prayed for a chance to avoid a full-scale conflict, but deep down, she knew the hegemony wouldn't let them slip by unnoticed. A rogue fleet, led by a human captain, operating in their territory. It was impossible to ignore. "Time to move," she said, eyes locking onto the starfield ahead. "Prepare for engagement. We strike at their command cruiser first, disrupt their chain of command. We hit hard, hit fast, and get out." Commander Sharp, standing at her side, gave a sharp nod. "Acknowledge, Captain." Within moments, the Resolute Dawn and its accompanying ships powered up their engines and surged forward, breaking their stealth systems to reveal themselves. The galaxy's first real test of humanity's defiance had begun. The hegemony patrols didn't stand a chance. The Resolute Dawn's sleek, nimble design allowed it to weave through incoming fire with ease, while its advanced point defense systems destroyed enemy missiles mid-flight. The hegemony ships were large, lumbering, and overconfident. Human ships, on the other hand, had been designed to fight in unpredictable, asymmetrical ways. The battle was a disorienting blur of energy blasts, precision strikes, and tactical brilliance. But humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons. It was the will to fight, to never back down. Every maneuver, every assault, was carried out with a ferocity that left the hegemony ships in shock. The human fleet had no intention of running. It was here to win. "We've neutralized the outer patrols," Harlow reported, his voice steady but full of awe. "They're calling for reinforcements. 3 more ships coming in." "Perfect," Voss said, a fierce grin tugging at her lips. "We'll keep them busy. Target their command cruiser and fire on my mark." The Resolute Dawn shifted into position, taking aim at the massive hegemony command ship, a gleaming behemoth hovering in orbit above Erethel. It was the key to their plan. Destroying it would cripple the enemy's ability to coordinate. As the fleet aligned, a single voice rang out from the comms, a loudspeaker blaring over their fleet's frequency. "You're outmatched, human. Surrender now or face annihilation." Voss didn't hesitate. "Open fire." The first volley of plasma blasts erupted from the Resolute Dawn's cannons, striking the hegemony cruiser with a blinding flash. The enemy ship shuddered violently, its shields flickering as they began to collapse under the sustained assault. "Direct hit," shouted Sharp. "Their shields are failing." For the first time in the battle, the hegemony's confidence wavered. The tide was turning, but not without cost. As the enemy ship faltered, Voss's fleet took a hit from an incoming salvo. One of their destroyers, the Stalwart, erupted in flames, its hull twisting under the force of the blast. "Casualties reported on Stalwart," Harlow called out, the pain in his voice palpable. "They're not going to make it." Voss's expression darkened, but she didn't flinch. "We keep fighting. For them. All of us." With one final, decisive strike, the Resolute Dawn tore through the hegemony's command cruiser, sending it spiraling into the void. The hegemony fleet, now without coordination, scattered in confusion. For a brief moment, victory seemed within reach. But Voss knew this was only the beginning. As the enemy regrouped, she turned to her crew. "Prepare for the next wave." Humanity had drawn blood. Now they had to prove they could endure the war to come. The remnants of the Resolute Dawn fleet limped through the debris field, the damaged Stalwart barely holding together after the brutal skirmish. Captain Voss stood at the bridge, her eyes scanning the space around her. A strange sense of triumph mixed with the bitter taste of loss. They had succeeded in their strike, yes, but at what cost? "Repairs are underway, Captain," Commander Sharp reported, his voice low. "But we're not going to be in fighting shape anytime soon. We'll need more time before we're ready to launch another attack." Voss nodded, her mind working furiously. They had inflicted a heavy blow on the hegemony, but the war was far from over. The fleet needed time to regroup, to recover, but there wasn't much of that to go around. They had drawn the attention of the hegemony, and the next battle would come sooner than they anticipated. "All ships, prepare for a defensive posture," Voss ordered. "We don't have long before the hegemony responds with reinforcements. Let's make sure we're ready when they arrive." "Captain," came a voice from the comms, interrupting her thoughts. It was Kale, the young Arathelian who had been in contact with their fleet since the beginning. "We've secured a rendezvous point. The Resistance can assist you, but you must move quickly. Hegemony patrols are on the move." Voss's expression tightened. She had hoped the Arathelian Resistance would be able to offer some help, but trusting them fully, especially with so little knowledge about their true capabilities, was still a risk. But she had no choice. Every moment they delayed brought them closer to being overwhelmed by the hegemony. "Understood," Voss replied. "We're en route. Prepare your people." The fleet changed course, heading toward the surface of Arafel. It wasn't much, a hidden base deep within the mountains, shielded from orbit by the thick atmosphere. Still, it was a refuge for the oppressed, a gathering place for those brave enough to stand against their oppressors. As the ships descended into the atmosphere, the first signs of Arafel's devastation became even clearer. Smoke rose from the ruins of cities that had once been hubs of culture and commerce. The land was scared, marked by the hegemony's brutal mining operations. But beneath the rubble, something else stirred: resilience. The spirit of the Arathelian people was not broken. They had endured far worse. The resolute Dawn and the remaining ships of the fleet settled into the hidden base, their landing gear sinking into the rocky ground. The Resistance was waiting. Kale, his face a mix of wariness and hope, approached the fleet, flanked by several of his comrades. "We've lost much," Kale said, his voice grim as he looked at Voss. "But with your help, Captain, we can take the fight to them. Together, we can free Arafel and the rest of the galaxy." Voss met his gaze, her resolve hardening. "This is just the beginning. We fight together, or we fall alone." And just like that, humanity and the Arathelian Resistance were bound by a common cause: to stand against the tyranny of the hegemony, no matter the cost. The Resistance base, hidden beneath the jagged cliffs of Arafel's remote mountains, hummed with activity. Inside, it was a hive of desperate preparation. Arathelian engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged weaponry, while others assembled crude, but effective, defense systems. Humanity's fleet had brought the edge they needed, and now, the Resistance had something even more valuable: hope. Captain Voss stood at the center of the operations room, the flickering holograms of star charts and battle plans illuminated before her. Around her, the Arathelian Resistance leaders debated strategy, voices rising with urgency. Kale, now more comfortable in the role of commander than he'd ever imagined, leaned over the map. "The hegemony's patrols are relentless. If we strike them here, in the heart of their mining complex, we can cripple their supply chain. They're already stretched thin trying to maintain control of multiple systems." Voss studied the holograms carefully, tracing the lines of potential assault routes. Their objective was clear: the hegemony's main mining facility on Arafel, a sprawling complex deep within the planet's crust. It was the source of the Empire's vast mineral resources, and its destruction would not only cripple their war machine, but also send a message to the galaxy that humanity and its allies were no longer afraid to fight back. "If we hit them here," Voss began, pointing to a specific facility, "we'll not only disrupt their operations, but also draw attention away from their capital ships in orbit. They'll be forced to respond." Commander Sharp, standing beside her, frowned. It's risky. There's a heavy garrison stationed there, and the mines are heavily fortified. We could get bogged down before we even reach the heart of the facility. I know the risks, Voss replied, her voice steady but intense. But we don't have time to wait for the perfect moment. Every day we delay, more Erathelian lives are lost. More resistance cells are wiped out. The hegemony will crush us unless we show them that we can hit them where it hurts. Cal's gaze hardened. I understand. My people have been living in shadows for far too long. It's time to fight back. With your help, we can turn the tide. A silence settled over the room as the weight of their collective resolve filled the space. The stakes had never been higher. Humanity's fleet and the Erathelian resistance would strike together, uniting their strengths to take on the overwhelming power of the hegemony. The cost would be high, but failure was simply not an option. Voss looked around at the gathered leaders, human and Erathelian alike. Gather your forces. We strike at dawn. Cal nodded. We'll meet you at the rally point. This will be the beginning of the end for the hegemony. Voss turned to Sharp, her expression hardening. This is it, the beginning of something bigger than any of us. We fight not just for Erathel, but for every planet the hegemony has ever enslaved. Let's make it count, Sharp replied. And with that, the fleet and the resistance prepared for the battle that would determine the fate of Erathel, and perhaps the entire galaxy. The first light of dawn barely touched the horizon of Erathel, but on the surface, the world was already alive with the sounds of conflict. The resistance had moved swiftly, using every ounce of the intelligence Voss and her fleet had gathered, coordinating a multi-pronged assault that would hit the hegemony where it hurt the most. On the surface, the hegemony's massive mining facility stretched across the planet like a tumor, its industrial machinery gouging deep into the planet's crust. Massive drills, railguns, and refineries hummed ominously in the early morning light. But beneath it all, something was about to shift. The resolute dawn hovered just above the planet's surface, its sleek silhouette blending into the dim glow of the rising sun. The fleet had launched a full-scale assault, striking from multiple angles, each of their ships fast, efficient, and built for asymmetrical warfare, slashed through the hegemony's defenses like knives through paper. All units, commence attack. Voss's voice rang out across the comms, her command clear and decisive. The battle erupted in a flash of fire and light. The resolute dawn and its accompanying ships opened fire, their weapons unleashing powerful torrents of energy onto the hegemony's orbital defenses. A massive explosion tore through one of their destroyers, sending it spinning toward the planet, its twisted wreckage falling in a blazing trail. Direct hit. The outer defenses are down, Lieutenant Harlow reported, his voice full of urgency. They're pulling reinforcements from the surface, but we've created a hole in their perimeter. Meanwhile, on the ground, Cal led the charge. His Erathelian forces, bolstered by human tactical support, stormed the mining facility, clashing with hegemony soldiers entrenched in the facility's fortified walls. The Erathelian warriors fought with a ferocity born of years of oppression. Their claws and blades cut through the hegemony's ranks, but the battle was anything but easy. The enemy had prepared, and they weren't going down without a fight. Push forward, Cal shouted, rallying his forces. This is our home. Fight for our freedom. Voss watched the unfolding chaos from the bridge of the resolute dawn, her heart pounding with every explosion and every scream that crackled over the comms. She could see the tides of battle shift in their favor, slowly, painfully, but they were moving forward. Their combined strength was starting to tear at the hegemony's hold on Erathel. Reinforcements are arriving from the surface, Sharp called out, his eyes glued to the screens. A hegemony dreadnought is inbound. Voss gritted her teeth. They had no time to waste. We can't let them regroup. We finish this now. With a single order, the resolute dawn launched a final devastating volley, a concentrated barrage aimed directly at the incoming dreadnought. The ship shuddered as the weapons systems powered up, sending a storm of energy blasts toward the enemy vessel. The dreadnought's shields flickered and fell, and with a deafening explosion, the ship was torn apart, its wreckage spiraling into the abyss. On the ground, Kel's forces had breached the main facility. The hegemony was reeling. They were fighting to hold their ground, but they knew they were losing. The heart of their operation was bleeding, and they could no longer afford to maintain control. "This is it," Cale said, breathing heavily as he surveyed the ruined facility. "They're broken." Voss's voice came over the comms, strong and unwavering. "We've won this battle. But the war is far from over." With the hegemony's forces in disarray, the fires of rebellion had been stoked. The message was clear. The galaxy was no longer silent. Humanity, and its new allies, had ignited the spark of revolution. The battle for Erythel had left its mark. The once gleaming mining facility now lay in ruins, smoldering under the weight of its defeat. On the surface, the resistance celebrated their hard-won victory, their war cries echoing across the mountains. The hegemony had been dealt a devastating blow, but the war was far from over. Voss stood at the edge of the wreckage, her eyes scanning the horizon. The sky was clear, a rare sight after so many days of smoke and fire. The wind carried the scent of earth, of freedom, but the weight of what lay ahead still pressed on her shoulders. "We've done it," Sharp said, standing beside her, his voice soft but filled with disbelief. "We actually did it." Voss didn't respond immediately. The taste of victory was bittersweet. They had won a battle, yes, but the hegemony was vast, and this was just one small world in a galaxy dominated by their oppression. The resistance on Erythel would need time to rebuild, and the fight would only grow more dangerous from here. Still, she allowed herself a brief moment to savor the feeling of success. A short distance away, Cale approached, his wings torn but his expression fierce. He had led his people to this moment of liberation, and the pride in his eyes was unmistakable. "It's hard to believe," Cale said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "For so long we lived under the hegemony's heel. But now, we're free." Voss turned to him, her gaze steady. "This victory is just the beginning. There are more worlds under the hegemony's thumb, more people who need our help." Cale nodded, his wings fluttering slightly as he spoke. "And we will help them. The fire you've sparked here on Erythel will spread. We will unite the oppressed. Together, we can drive the hegemony out." Voss placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll need to move quickly. The hegemony will retaliate. But we've shown them they're not invincible. The galaxy won't stay quiet any longer." The ground trembled as the remaining ships in the fleet powered down, their systems cooling after the battle. The Resolute Dawn had taken damage, but it would be repaired. And when it was ready, it would carry them to the next battle, because there would always be another. The fight for freedom was endless, but now, humanity had a chance to lead. A comm signal interrupted her thoughts. Harlow's voice crackled through the static. "Captain, we've received a transmission. It's the Resistance. They're ready to form an alliance." Voss smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Send the message. We accept." As the stars above Erythel sparkled, the fleet began to prepare for the next phase of their mission. They had shattered the hegemony's hold on one world, but the war was far from over. Yet, for the first time in a long while, hope burned bright. Humanity had become the champions of the defenseless, and they would fight, together, for the freedom of the galaxy.